Let's get straight into numbers 20 through 11 of what are objectively the top 60 board games of all time. That's right, I guess I forgot to mention that I've utilized the latest in quantum mechanics advancements to eliminate all subjective variables from this list. So, let's see what science has to offer. Number 20 is Manila by Franz Benno de Long and published by Zachspiel. This edition is the original edition that had the wooden boats in it. I rate the game 8 out of 10, and my wife enjoys this one a lot as well. The number of players listed on the box is 3 to 5, and it does scale well for 3 to 5 players. The listed play time is 60 minutes. I say realistically you want probably more like 90 minutes for a game. The complexity I put at 3 out of 10. It's quite light, although there are a couple of rules that I seem to have to look up every single time we play, such as how pirates and the insurance agent work, who, unlike in real life, are not the same thing. Much like other gambling games such as Camel Up and Down Force, Manila is all about the laughter and groans in response to the whims of the dice and Lady Luck. However, this game's position in my ranking comes with a pretty massive caveat. I don't like that the game is all about the auction to be the harbor master each round, and that whoever is the harbor master gets to purchase a share, decide which goods will be loaded on the boats, decide where the boats will start, places the first worker before each boat movement, and rolls the dice to move the boats, while everyone else basically just sits back and watches. So I play a variant where the harbor master benefits are reduced and these tasks are shared amongst more players, and I've personally found that to be more fun and engaging for everyone, with every play of the game now being a thriller in Manila. This variant is available on Board Game Geek in the files section of the Manila page there if you do want to check it out and look at it in more detail. All in all, this dice-based gambling game is a great stepping stone to get kids to the craps tables, and it has the best plastic coins in any game. Number 19 is Akrotiri, which was designed by Jay Cormier and Senfung Lim, who's actually local to the Southern Ontario gaming scene here. This one was published by Zedman Games, and I'm holding the second edition in my hand here. I rate the game 8.5 out of 10, and my wife has not played it. I don't think it's really her style of game. The number of players listed on the box is 2 players because it is strictly a 2-player game, and the listed playtime is 45 minutes, which is also an accurate number. You do want about 45 minutes to play it. I put the complexity at 4 out of 10. Most of the complexity is in the actual tile placement, with orienting tiles in order to create temple maps while also making viable boat routes for the resources. So there's some complexity in how the tile laying works, but the rules themselves aren't too bad. If you're familiar with Tobago, then you'll have a pretty good picture of the core of this game, which uses sort of a reverse deduction where players discover locations on a map based on how they put the map together in relation to the cards they have in hand. Akrotiri is truly a unique design that combines this location finding with an action point based turn structure and exploring, tile laying, variable market values, and a pick up and deliver based economic system, all of which results in a brilliant game that feels much bigger than the tiny box it comes in. Just make sure you move quickly, because just as in real life, the more Minoan temples you excavate, the more action points you have to work with. I highly recommend this game to anyone who doesn't struggle with analysis paralysis in the face of a large number of options that require visualizing various spatial orientations. Also, check out Akrotiri's short cameo in my Santorini video. Number 18 is Isle of Skye by Alexander Pfister and Andreas Pelikan, and published by Mayfair Games. I do own the Isle of Skye Journeyman expansion, and although I've never played it, after reading the rulebook, I think I'm going to end up selling it because it seems to shovel a whole lot of stuff into what is a beautifully simple and elegant base game. However, I would like to check out the Druids expansion. That one looks pretty interesting to me. I rate the game 8.5 out of 10, and my wife enjoys it quite a bit too. The number of players shown on the box is 2 to 5. I would say the sweet spot for this one is 3 or 4 players. The playtime listed is 60 minutes, which is pretty accurate. It's quite a fast-moving game. I put the complexity at 3 out of 10, although it's initially very hard for new players to figure out how to evaluate their own tiles. After a single play, it runs really smoothly. Now, I'm pretty prejudiced because I have relatives who live in Portree on the Isle of Skye, and I did get to visit them and tour the island while I was in Scotland for a couple of weeks, a couple of decades ago. In fact, I traveled with my cousin, who painted this little painting based on our visit to the Isle of Skye. But with that little disclaimer aside, I was really enamored with this game from the very first play. It's like they took Carcassonne, gave players individual tableaus to work on rather than a shared board, added a really interesting economic system, and finished it off with a nearly infinitely variable score system so that every game feels just a little bit different. Of course, the one thing that's completely the opposite of real life in Skye is the fact that easy road access to whiskey distilleries actually improves a player's income in the game. All this goodness is wrapped up in the delightful artwork of Clemens Franz, who thankfully didn't skimp on the cute sheep that remind me so much of Scotland, or those hairy Highland cows, which are known to the locals as Hieland coos. Number 17 is actually one of the newest games in my collection, and that is Seven Wonders Duel, designed by Antoine Bauza and Bruno Catala, and published by Repos Productions. I also own the Pantheon expansion, which I would say is practically an essential expansion since it takes away the forced choosing of a card and adds some really interesting choices to the game. My rating of the game is 8.5 out of 10, and my wife really enjoyed our first play of the game. The number of players listed is 2 because it's strictly a 2-player game again, and the play time, I say they really underestimate. They have 30 minutes on the box. I say realistically you're kind of pushing an hour, maybe until you're really familiar with the game, or if you're not playing with the Pantheon expansion added in there. The complexity I have at 6 out of 10, but it is significantly easier if you're familiar with the original Seven Wonders game. I never did actually enjoy the original Seven Wonders board game very much, and the official 2-player variant for that game, which Bruno Catala also helps to design, was downright terrible. But now that Antoine and Bruno have had more time to mess around with the 2-player rules, I'll be darned if they haven't come up with a stunningly brilliant game. As with Akrotiri, this is a very thinky 2-player experience that feels like a very big game in a very small box. It would certainly be a lot to absorb for somebody who hasn't played the original Seven Wonders, like I mentioned, but that's only because there's so much awesomeness happening here. There's the standard victory point conditions to work toward as you build up your civilization, but just as in real life, there's also the threat of an immediate victory if you let your opponent's military or science influence get too out of hand. This aspect creates a lot of tension, and in fact in my last game I was feeling pretty good about my victory point situation, but ended up losing to my opponent's military on the very last card of the game and didn't even get to the counting of victory points. It is such a great game. Number 16 is Dixit, which was designed by Jean-Louis Ribera and published by Asmodee. I do own the Dixit Quest expansion, and I'm just waiting for other expansions to go on sale so I can get more of them. I rate the game 8.5 out of 10, and my wife's rating would be very high too if she were to rate it. The number of players listed on the box is 3 to 6. Ideally, you'd want 4 to 6, although you can have a pretty good play experience with 3 just by adding a random card from the deck to the display row each time. The listed playtime is 30 minutes, which is a little optimistic. I would say you want closer to an hour for a play. And the complexity I have at 3 out of 10. The complexity is mostly in the challenge of playing well, which is rather unusual for a party game. Although the gameplay isn't very similar to Codenames, Dixit falls very much into the same very cerebral party game space as Codenames. It's such an incredibly unique and clever game that has players taking turns giving a clue about one of their cards that has to be good enough for some people to guess, but not easy enough that everyone will get it. Because, just as in real life, they will receive no points if nobody gets it or if everybody gets it. What makes it all possible is the wacky, whimsical artwork that makes every single card in the game a unique piece of layered visual imagery. And the cherry on the Dixit sundae is the fact that the score markers are wooden rabbits, or squirrels/beavers. I've never liked cherries on my ice cream. Fruit has no place on my chocolate fudge sundae. Oh man, we're breaking the top 15 now. I'm excited. And coming in at number 15 is Chaos in the Old World. This was designed by Eric M. Lang, another designer who also was originally local to this area. And this was published by Fantasy Flight Games. I do have the excellent Horned Rat expansion in here too. I rate the game 8.5 out of 10, and my wife has never played it. The number of players shown on the box is 3 to 5, though I would say that you do want the full 4 players, or if you have the Horned Rat expansion, you want 4 or 5 players. The playtime shown is 1 to 2 hours, though unless you're really rushing it, I think you want more like 2.5 hours to get through a whole game. I have the complexity pretty high at 7 out of 10. Just as in real life, each of the 5 gods has unique abilities and very different play styles, and a decent play of the game requires that all players have at least a basic knowledge of the strengths and weaknesses of each of the gods, as well as how to play them, and just as importantly, how to play against the other gods. I admit that I wasn't at all attracted to this game when it was first published 10 years ago. Hey, how about a 10-year anniversary edition? But the thing is, I knew nothing about the Warhammer fantasy world that the game is based on, and I find the game's visuals to be weird and grotesque. But it very quickly was getting rave reviews, so I decided to purchase it, and now that I've played it, I will confidently assert that Chaos in the Old World is Eric Lang's best design, although my kids do really enjoy Arcadia Quest, which he co-designed, and I thought that there were some pretty clever things happening in Arcane Academy, which Eric co-designed with Kevin Wilson. Just don't get me started on Blood Rage. Years ago, I started a big project to really enhance a lot of the game's physical components, but those sit collecting dust on the back burner along with my dream of starting a Chaos Club with my wife and 3 other gamers, where we would play this game at least every couple of weeks and really dig into the nuances of all 5 gods and their various strategies. Maybe someday my dream of being a bi-weekly god will come true. Number 14 is Lords of Zidit, designed by Regis Bonasse and published by Libelud. My rating of the game is 8.5 out of 10, and this is another that my wife is very fond of. The number of players shown on the box is 3 to 5, but ideally you want 4 or 5 unless you enjoy playing with dummy players, which I typically do not. The playtime shown is 90 minutes, which is a pretty accurate estimate, and the complexity I have at 4 out of 10. It's kind of on the lighter end of the medium range. Lords of Zidit is an updated version of Regis's earlier game from 2002 called Himalaya, which was itself an updated version of Marchand d'Empire. I had Himalaya and definitely preferred its theme of moving caravans of yaks through the mountains over the generic fantasy of Lords of Zidit that was designed to be in the same world as Regis Bonasse's most popular game, Seasons. Lords of Zidit's dumb name is also an anagram of Dixit, which I assume was an attempt to capitalize on that game's popularity too. But Lords of Zidit had some obvious rules improvements over Himalaya, plus it had those amazing little plastic military units and the action planning dials, so ultimately I decided to go with the newer game. It's a slightly crazy game of simultaneous action selection, but the killer score system is what really makes the game. At the end of the game, players are evaluated in 3 different categories. The scores of the first category are tallied and, just as in real life, the player with the lowest score is eliminated. Then the remaining players look at their scores in the second category, and the lowest scoring player is once again eliminated. Finally, the remaining players add up their score in the third category, with the highest score finally being the winner of the game. It's quite a vicious and tense way of forcing players to focus on every aspect of the game, especially since they only have perfect information regarding everyone's scores with one of the 3 categories that are scored. If you can handle having preset plans go awry, it's quite a fun experience. Number 13 is The Quest for El Dorado. It was designed by Rainer Knizia and published by Ravensburger Spielverlag GmbH. This is just the base game because I haven't yet seen the Heroes and Hexes expansion show up in Canada, though I'm eagerly awaiting it. I rate the game 8.5 out of 10, and my wife enjoys it a lot too. The number of players shown on the box is 2 to 4, and it does scale well with 2 to 4. In fact, I would say that it's almost best with 2 because each player gets 2 explorers and there's more interesting tactical things to consider. The playtime listed on the box is 60 minutes, which is accurate, and the complexity I have at 3 out of 10. It's Kinesia simple. This typically clean and stripped down Kinesia design is a pure race game built purely on deck building. I have weirdly mixed feelings about the game because while I do like it an awful lot, the best strategy for the base game, along with the suggested courses that are in the rule book, just as in real life, is to purchase as few cards as possible and just keep moving forward. This sort of sucks the fun out of the deck building aspect because I don't want the entire strategy of the game to come down to just a few key card purchases. I've actually tested this a few times playing it solo where I controlled all 4 characters and used different strategies for each character, and sure enough it seems to be that whoever purchases the fewest cards seems to do the best. However, this issue can be easily overcome by building longer race courses to play on if you don't mind a slightly longer game, and apparently by picking up the Heroes and Hexes expansion you can also add some more interesting things. Like I said, I'm eager to try it out, even though the Hexes aspect looks slightly off-putting because I'm more into positive effects in games rather than negative effects, but I definitely am going to purchase it when I can. If, however, the expansion turns out to be a dud for me, I can see this game dropping considerably in my rankings, but for now, I do consider it to be a big success. Number 12 is Spirit Island, designed by R. Eric Rios and published by Fabled Nexus / Greater Than Games. Crammed into this already large and heavy box are the Branch and Claw expansion, as well as the promo spirits Heart of the Wildfire and Serpent Slumbering Beneath the Island. I rate the game 9 out of 10. That's right, we're into the 9s now. I think my wife enjoys the game. The number of players shown on the box is 1 to 4, which is an accurate number. The playtime shown on the box is 90 to 120 minutes. I think you would want to have the full 2 hours there to get a good play experience in. The complexity I have at 8 out of 10. There are so many intertwangled mechanisms going on here. With all the games out there that place players in the shoes and fancy hats of European colonial empire builders, I'm immediately in love with a cooperative game that says, guess what? The European colonizers are the bad guys, and you play as the island spirits who are endeavoring to protect the indigenous inhabitants from these invaders. Talk about flipping that old trope right on its fancy-hatted head. But be forewarned, this is not a breezy game to play by the ocean with a frozen daiquiri in one hand while on island time. Between the rules load and the complex card interactions, this is a game for the serious gamer. In fact, 2 games were released in 2017 that each left me with the feeling that the designer is very literally a mad genius. We had Gloomhaven from Isaac Childress, and now Spirit Island from R. Eric Rios. Everything from the theme to the card play to the naming of the spirits left me thinking, here is someone who is operating on another level. I would play this one more often, but I know what it's going to do to my brain. So I'm finishing off today's games with kind of a weird one. At number 11, I have Beyond Balderdash and Why Did the Chicken and Wise and Otherwise. I've actually combined 3 Balderdash style games into one fantabulously hilarious make stuff up game. Beyond Balderdash, also known as Absolute Balderdash, was designed by Laura Robinson and Paul Toyne. Why Did the Chicken was designed by Corey Heath, and there's no credited designer for Wise and Otherwise. I rate this little game combo 9 out of 10, and in the past when my wife rated it, she gave it a 7 out of 10. The ideal number of players for this experience would be 4 to 8, and the ideal play time would be at least 45 minutes, possibly longer if everyone's having fun. The complexity I put at 2 out of 10. It's simple as long as you're creative. All three of these games share a similar framework of improvisational creativity. In Beyond Balderdash, you have different categories. You have definitions where, just as with the original Balderdash, you're given a word and tasked with coming up with a definition for the word. You also have a people category that gives you a name and asks what that person is famous for. You have initials, where it just gives you initials and asks what they stand for. You have movies, which gives a movie title and asks you to write a brief plot summary. And then finally there's dates, which gives a date and asks what significant event happened on that date. Why Did the Chicken asks for answers to questions that are created by randomly inserting a couple of nouns into a question framework. And then Wise and Otherwise gives the first half of an inspirational proverb and asks players to complete it. Personally, I absolutely love this style of game, but I've discovered that you really do need the right group to play it with, because if you don't have that naturally quick improvisational sort of wit, this type of game can really be extremely stressful and can lead to a lot of sitting around waiting for players to come up with stuff. Unfortunately, we haven't played these games in quite a long time. That's partly because we do something similar with Jackbox TV on my friend's PlayStation, so we do get a similar experience with that. Ooh, we're getting into the top 10 next. If you've been following along at all with my past board game videos, there will be a couple titles in that top 10 that won't be a surprise to you. However, I expect there will be a couple that are going to end up being a surprise. So stay tuned, you don't want to miss it. Hey, it's Josh. Thank you so much for watching. If you wouldn't mind just crushing that like button, smashing that subscribe button, and chucking the link for this video with someone who you think would enjoy it, by golly, I would appreciate that. Cheers. Let's get straight into numbers 11 through 11. Let's get... And I have utilized the latest in quantum mechanics. Advancements. Numbers. For somebody who is not familiar with that, it would be 6 out of 10. For somebody who is, I don't need to add that nonsense. There's also the threat of an immediate victory if you let your opponent... Number 16 is Dixit, designed by Jean-Louis Ribera, and... Time's up again. Is the fact that the score markers are wooden rabbits. Dixit falls very much into the same very cerebral. Lord of Zit. Number 12 is all the way over here, and it is Spirit Island, designed by R. Eric Rios and published by Fabled. It's got to be less awkward than doing that. Closer to 2 hours would be it. And you play as the spirit. All three of these games share a... I expect that if you've been following along with my past board game videos, I don't think I feel like doing that again.